So, the Chargers are burst with a bunch of good news, and this is super exciting. You know, the draft is just a month away, and the free agency period is slowly coming to an end. This is the time when teams prepare for the real battle, and if the Chargers are receiving good news now, you can imagine just how significant it might be. So, let's explore. What's up, Chargers fans? Welcome to the NFL Playbook Chargers. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. This channel is all about breaking down everything you need to know about the Bolts. Okay, so the first good news is that finally we have contract details of the Chargers' new signing offensive lineman, Andre James. You know, when he was signed, it was worth questioning exactly how big the contract was and what the contract could mean, because players of his caliber are taking good money home. But now we have all the details, and you will be amazed to know the actual amount. Thanks to Over the Cap, James' contract has been revealed as a one-year veteran minimum deal that checks in at a $1.17 million cap hit. That's it. Yeah, this is another classic Jim Harbaugh and Joe Hortiz low-risk, high-reward signing. You can get an idea from this just how favorable this contract is for the Chargers, as they brought back the 31-year-old Bradley Bozeman this offseason too, with a $5 million cap charge in 2025. And James is only 28 years old. So yes, definitely, I will call this great news. And speaking of contract, we have got the details of offensive lineman Mekhi Becton's contract details too. And I'm sure you will scratch your head and think how the Chargers are doing this, how they are so good at negotiation. You know, negotiation is not winning. It's actually a win-win situation for both parties. So here are Becton's contract details. The Becton contract is reported as a simple 2-year contract worth $20 million. According to Over the Cap, Becton's $20 million contract includes a $7.3 million cap hit in 2025 that escalates to $12.5 million in 2026. But there's a catch. There is zero guaranteed salary on Becton's 2026, and cutting or trading him would net $10 million in cap savings. In other words, it's a prove-it deal these Chargers under general manager Joe Hortiz love to give out. It's effectively a one-year deal with an option for a second season, and a very reasonable way for the team to get out of it, if necessary. It's an understandable agreement for team and player, too. You know, Becton was considered a first-round bust, yeah, but Becton kicked inside to guard with Philadelphia last year, enjoyed a breakout season, and won a Super Bowl. So there's no reason to think Becton can't keep that going, especially when getting to line up next to an ascending star like Joe Alt. But if he can't, the Chargers left themselves options for 2026. So this is another big move. And speaking of contracts, PFF recently published an article highlighting 20 NFL players expected to get significant contract extensions soon. It includes names like Brock Purdy, Kyle Hamilton, Sauce Gardner, and Aiden Hutchinson. Interestingly, there is only one Chargers player on the list, Rashawn Slater. Now, you can say it the good news or the bad news, but I will call it good news. Let me explain why. This actually shows that the Chargers have young, ascending players who are poised for big deals in the future. At the same time, the team's cap situation remains very manageable, putting them in great shape moving forward. Unlike teams like the Browns or the Saints, who seem to push their financial issues down the road every year, the Chargers don't face those kinds of challenges. It's a solid position to be in. And speaking of Rashawn Slater, he deserves an extension. I mean, just look at his stats. He holds the 11th highest PFF overall grade since 2022 among qualified tackles, and his 0.49 wins above replacement last year ranked 5th at the position. So having this caliber player on your roster is good news in itself. It reinforces the fact that the Chargers have one of the top young talents in the league. Having Slater on this list is a good sign of the team's potential, while still maintaining a healthy cap situation. Yes, nobody denies the value of healthy cap situation, and when you also have proven roster, then it's icing on the cake, and the Chargers are enjoying it. Okay, now let's move to another good news, remaining free agents. Yes, you know, there are still plenty of positions still to be addressed, and draft is one solution, but it's kind of a bet on the new players. Not every drafted player emerges as an elite, or I can say reliable, because NFL level is totally different than college football. And compared to this, the free agency is where you get proven players. Or at least you know their real situation. You don't need to develop those players. Yes, free agency costs more than draft, but if you are on a win-now mode, then free agency is the right solution. So here's still some solid depth available at cornerback and defensive end, but the standout name here is Brandon Scherff, a guard. There are also a few other interior offensive linemen still up for grabs. The strategy could be to go through the draft and then revisit free agency if there are any gaps left to fill. With 11 draft picks, the Chargers have plenty of flexibility, and it's reassuring to know that quality options will still be available post-draft if needed. That's a strong position to be in. Moving on to the third piece of good news, the latest mock draft predicts the Chargers landing Will Johnson, a cornerback out of Michigan. Johnson has been rated as a top 10 pick at times. Maybe not quite top 5, but definitely a strong top 10 talent. If he falls to the Chargers, it would be a major win. Johnson is the kind of player who can step in and make an immediate impact. He's not quite on Sauce Gardner's level, but he's right behind him, which is high praise. If this scenario plays out, it's a huge boost for the defense. All in all, this is an exciting possibility for the Chargers. And there's been some talk about players who are considered boomer types, guys who could be worth taking a chance on. One of those players is Willie Lampkin from North Carolina, an offensive lineman who can play center or guard. He's exactly the kind of player the Chargers might want to keep an eye on. Due to his size, he might fall in the draft, which could make him steal for a team like the Chargers. When you look at measurements from the Senior Bowl, offensive linemen since 2010 have mostly been clustered in a certain range, taller and heavier players. Lampkin, however, is an outlier. He's shorter and doesn't weigh as much, but he's an absolute beast on the field. If he falls to a later round, maybe the 5th, 4th, or even 3rd, he could be a great pickup. His ability to stonewall defenders is impressive, and there's tape showing him completely shutting down bigger opponents in drills. It's clear he has the potential to be a solid depth piece or even a starter. That's the beauty of having so many picks. Players like Willie Lampkin might not be household names, but when they fall because of their size or other factors, they become opportunities. It's hard not to appreciate what a player like Lampkin could bring to the table, whether as a dependable backup or a surprise contributor. This is what makes the draft so exciting, and for the Chargers, having those picks means they can take these kinds of calculated risks. Let's revisit this and take a closer look at the players hovering around that 22nd pick range. There's another cornerback in the mix, Jahdae Barron, who's projected to go ahead of Will Johnson. Now, if Johnson ends up going earlier, you still have Barron as an option, which is great. Then there's Malaki Starks. He's not a pressing need, but he's another solid player. And Omarion Hampton? He's incredible and could be available just before your pick in the 20s. Everyone's talking about Gentry, but Hampton deserves attention too. What's exciting here is the Chargers' ability to choose from this cluster of talented players. Brad Holmes, the GM of the Lions, has mentioned how drafting in the 20s for a few years in a row has shown there's a sweet spot where you're thrilled with the options. Unlike picking in the top 10, where you might feel pressure to grab a specific position, being in the 20s gives you the flexibility to choose from a group of players you're genuinely happy about. I can remember a comment on one of my videos, and that was great that. The only real advantage of picking high is if you need a quarterback. Otherwise, the difference isn't as big as people think. So, with so many talented players in college football, moving down just 10 spots from the top 10 still leaves you with excellent options. It's about picking between 5 or 6 players that make you say, all right, we can't go wrong here. That's the kind of excitement the Chargers are looking at. They're sitting in a position where they can use their 11 picks wisely and make some impactful decisions. This draft is shaping up to be a real opportunity for the team to reload and build for the future. The Chargers are in an interesting spot right now. Maybe they trade a few picks, maybe they add more, or even offload some. But let's say they stick with 10 picks. That's 10 fresh young players joining a team that already did so much right last offseason. And really, that's been the key. The Chargers didn't make any rash moves last year. Instead, they let the comp picks roll in, allowed their cap space to stabilize, and avoided overspending. That patience was crucial. Typically, teams might feel pressured to make a big splash and overspend in free agency, but the Chargers didn't fall into that trap. And yet, despite taking a measured approach, they still made it to the playoffs. That's incredible considering how tough that first year can be when you're trying to build sustainably. So honestly, the Chargers are in a good position, and we as fans can show confidence that this year will be the Bolt year, and we will see big difference. So let me know your thoughts in the comments, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one.